This is for the DCC111 textiles module for the Napoleon Blown Apart project. This is my screen printing samples. I've done screen printing before, so I know how the process works. I've not done it on tables with the padded, the tables that I used at college had like a lip, so you could like hold the screen against it so it won't slip while you're printing, and I'm not used to not having that. So the first print I did, it came out a little bit blurry. I wasn't quite sure about how to get it so it didn't move. I think weights were the way to go. It's just sort of like holding it down in the right way that it's not going to slide around at all. So the first print definitely moved between poles, which is sort of annoying, but I sort of got the feel of it after that. The second one I did came out much better. I used some weights to kind of weigh it down, and I kind of managed to hold it so it didn't slide. So that one came out really well. So after a couple of pulls I was running out of the ink. The blue was, there wasn't much left of the blue, so I put some red in there just to see if I could get it to do like a gradient. It didn't really work because there wasn't enough of the blue. I think if I wanted to do a proper gradient I'd have to even out the amount of paint for each side. So that was that one. So you got a little bit of blue. And then I went back over one of the ones I'd originally printed, and I moved it around, so I printed on top using a similar process. So I had the blue in there, and then put the red paint on for the second round, I think, or other way around. So the red paint was originally, and then I put some blue paint in. Like here it's kind of gone, it's done this sort of like gradient that I was trying to go for. I think if I wanted to do that, if I wanted to be able to repeat that, I'd have to do it. I'd have to do a lot more experiments on it. It seems like a pretty unreliable way of doing a gradient for colours, although when it works it probably look quite cool. I also found some, it's sort of like muslin, sort of, just a very thin fabric. I wanted to try it on a sheer fabric but I couldn't find any at the time. But this one I've done the, again it's the red and the blue mix. This one came out quite well, and it is quite clear on both sides as well, which could be useful, so that's good. And then I tried it on some of the thicker fabrics, so this one's got a lot more texture to it, and that's going to affect the quality of the print. So that was the original sort of, I think it's like a leopard skin type thing, I'm not really sure what it's meant to be. So that was that. It came out okay. There's a couple bits where it's like blurry, where it's raised, but I think the smaller pattern worked quite well. And then I had a much bigger pattern which was on the other side of the screen with a snowflake. It sort of worked. I was running out of paint, which is why it's gone a bit thin here. The darker colour looked quite well on the green. I wasn't really planning the colours around the fabric too much. I was just trying to find bits big enough to print onto. But that came out quite clearly, even on the kind of raised bits. So that'd be a good technique to use for like added texture if I wanted to do that. I like the snowflake print, so I tried it on a couple of different other fabrics. So this one's sort of like a satin with like an upholstery satin. It worked out a lot better with the when I had more paint to use. It's a lot smoother. I think the colour works better with this. That's definitely something I need to keep in mind. The only thing that annoys me is because it's a reverse print, this like, it's very boxy, so unless I was trying to, unless I was going to like cut that out and use it as like a patch or an applique, it's sort of not very practical, so I need to keep that in mind if I'm ever making up screen prints to use. And then there was this one again with like a much heavier, kind of like embroidered, the lighting's terrible again. It's got a much heavier embroidered pattern onto it. It's like an upholstery sample again. It looks quite cool around here where the paint's been applied more evenly, where it's got like the sort of like the bits where the paint didn't touch. That looks quite interesting. It might be cool to do just like a blank screen on with something, so not have like a picture but just have it have something very heavily embroidered and then just like print onto it and then see what comes up. It might be a good way of like using colour as well, because the background colour shows through, so that would be pretty cool. So then I went on and I picked up this screen. It was a bit more tricky to use because it was the same pattern on the two sides of the screen. I only wanted it on the one side, so I experimented with how many pulls of the squeegee thingy it would take for the paint to come through. So this is on one pull, so it's kind of gone all mottly and it hasn't come through very much, and even on the bottom here it's you can barely see the pattern at all because it's been it's not as dense of a, it's not like a solid colour. Then I did the two pulls. I used the entire screen for this one. I've already started putting it together to go in my book. This one came out a lot better. There's a couple of inconsistencies in the paint around here where I think there were creases in the fabric, so I need to remember to iron the fabric out before I use it again. But both sides came out pretty much identical. They're both in here as samples, so that'll go into my technical folder. There are places, I think here, I think there was a bit of thread. It's just where the paint has been missed. So I need to definitely keep that in mind as well for future samples. And I found that especially on this sample here, where I think I used 3 pulls of the squeegee. I think it might have been a bit too much because the edges here are a bit rough. But here, there's a big line that has been blocked. It was a strip of newsprint that I hadn't noticed was underneath the, I think it had got stuck to the screen when I put it down to reposition the fabric, and it really sort of messed that print up. It took me a while to figure out what it was still stuck to the screen. I did have it somewhere. I was going to put it in my folder, but I'm not sure where it's gone now. It's such a little piece of thing. I'm not really sure why the bottom half of this has come out so badly. I think I may have been running out of paint again at this point, so it'd be good to, if I'm doing this properly in future, if I have like a particular colour that I mixed up, I'm going to have to make sure I've got a lot of it, just to do the initial experiments with, and kind of figure out how many pulls of the paint it would take to do a solid pattern. Then I moved on to experimenting with, it was like a lace screen that had come up. It was quite pretty and the pattern was quite dense, so I wanted to see what I could do with it. This is on another piece of the heavily woven fabric. It's sort of not very, it's sort of subtle, it's just sort of giving it more of like a mottled pink tinge. I think that was the 100% opacity one, so it's got high pigment in it. It didn't really work out very well. I think for like denser designs I'd have to use like a plainer fabric, or like at the very least a lighter fabric, because the dark fabrics would probably only work with lighter colours if the pigment is high enough. I think with these two colours they were too similar to properly pick out the design. It was quite a complex design. So then I tried it again on this piece of cotton. I think it looks really nice. I may have like done too many pulls on it. I think I did 2. Because the design is so delicate, I probably wouldn't need much. But again, if I was going to use it for an actual costume piece, I'd have to do a little bit of experimentation to see how much paint the fabric would absorb before it started bleeding. So I quite like the effect on that. It sort of adds a bit of colour without losing the kind of paleness to it, and it gives a bit more texture. I probably wouldn't use this technique to, like, not on a very big area of the costume, probably just because it's so dense and a very busy pattern, you're not really going to notice it other than a pink tinge. And the original fabric, the pattern is so busy anyway, you're going to lose that. So it's an interesting effect, but I don't know if I'd actually use that. Probably definitely not for this project. The next two pieces I tried on a, what I did was I pinned them to a piece of newsprint. So this one I managed to find some organza, and it had a couple of blue splodges on it, but it's not that big of a problem. I think just for the test it worked fairly well. The newsprint itself picked up most of the paint, which it looks quite interesting. This was the 100%, this was a very saturated paint. There were two that were being used in this particular colour. There was one that was like the kind of full dense pigment, and there was one that was a bit more translucent to be used on top of other patterns. I saw some of the samples from other people who've been using that and they look quite good. I think I'd like to experiment with that a little bit more. But I made a mistake here because I pinned the, so I didn't lose them, I pinned the fabric to the newsprint while it dried, but what that did was that made the paint on the paper stick to the organza. So the pattern on here is a lot blurrier than it would have been had I left it to dry hanging up. So I think next time if I do anything on like a fine fabric, it'd definitely be better if I hung it up rather than drying it flat. The other one I did was I used the more translucent one to see what it would do on a more textured fabric. So this is like a, I'm not really sure what it is, it's sort of just like a heavier fabric, probably like a drill or something, with like stripes on it, polyester something, I don't even know. But this one I left pinned, excuse me, I left pinned to the paper while it dried again, because it didn't soak through. It worked really well this time, and the pattern I think is quite nice and subtle. It's because it's translucent, it doesn't overpower the stripes. So if I did want to use that for something, that would be quite nice, especially if I'm going to be beading over the top of it, because you can, like, I can pick out like the swirls and things. So like beading and embroidery over the top of something like this would be quite nice, I think. The paper itself, you can see the difference in the opacity, just like from these two. So here it's very dark, this is the full saturation one, and then here it's a lot lighter, so the medium has kind of like, not watered it down, but it's, there's less pigment in the paint, so you can like print it on top of other things. So yeah, I'm not really sure how I would use this for my sleeve just yet. It might be good for, screen printing will probably be good for things like stripes and small motif patterns, but I haven't quite decided exactly what I want to do with that yet. I need to do a bit more development work on that. If I do use it, I'd probably use it on the paler sleeve, the white cotton, just because the white would be easier to screen print onto than the green, and I won't have to worry as much about colour matching or colour mixing, because if I've got the colour of the paint I screen print with is going to change based on the background colour, so I wouldn't have to worry as much about that if I'm printing onto a pale fabric, but it's still something to keep in mind for future projects.